Actually, I have a few pieces of advice for that. The first is to trust yourself.
Undercover Witch, and we talk about paranormal, spiritual, and a little bit about witchcraft and divination. And we have Rissa on today, which I'm super excited to talk to you. And you do a whole bunch of stuff. Like I was looking at your list of things that you have available and that you do, and I thought it was really awesome because I'm kind of the same way. um, but you're an author, editor, seer. You do um, different types of divinations and readings.
Gabrielle, thank you so much for having me. That was a great introduction. I am a seer. I am also an herbalist. I do ghost and esoteric history talks and tours. And I am all around interested in the process of storytelling and how it kind of defines us as both individuals and as community and society. And I also think it's fascinating how sometimes the stories we keep are the ones that create who we are.
I think that's absolutely beautiful. I'm actually a creative writing major, and I love blending all of those things together. For me, it's like a really spiritual process, and I 100% agree. And it's actually that statement kind of makes me think about the stories I carry with me.
Yeah, we all do. And actually, this might not be the right moment, but I'm going to just throw this out there for you. If you're a creative writing major, I'm also an author, poet, and playwright. I just took a class in seance poetry. Gabrielle, you would love it. You should look it up.
I will have to look that up. That sounds amazing. I'm in a poetry class right now, and somebody wrote something that was like, it was obviously very, very spiritual. And I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this wrong. I need to incorporate more of this in, at least with poetry anyway. But today we're here to talk about, I have a psychic series, which this is the episode. This is our third episode for this. And my goal is just to bring people along the ride with me. I've been doing this podcast since 2018, and this is the first kind of series that I started with. I kind of made it more formal recently, though. But I want to share with my followers how that whole process works, because a lot of them are newer to everything. They're very curious, but they're shy. They don't know what they want to get into. They don't know who to trust, who to talk to, or how things work. And I thought it'd be interesting because I've had psychics on, but specifically with your like tea leaf readings and smoke readings and things like that. I thought it would be interesting to just talk to you about how that worked a little bit. One question I did want to start with, because I'm actually very curious, is for tea leaf readings. Usually my first questions for readers is how they connect with their clients. But I've met some tea leaf readers that don't necessarily think about the connection with the client as much, but they want to like disconnect for a second and focus with what's in the cup. What's your approach to that? Do you build that connection there first, or?
All right, I'm gonna slide that sideways for you. So, Gabrielle, I'm a very fluid person, and sometimes the connection is fully in the cup, and sometimes I even have visions before the reading starts that are going to be relevant to what's going to come out later. So the answer is each one is completely individual. So both smoke reading and tea leaf reading are scrying. And when people think of scrying, they usually picture, a crystal ball or a mirror. And those are fantastic ways to engage in scrying. But there are other ways to do it. You can scry in a bowl of water. You can scry in a still lake, right? So it's anytime you're looking at like a surface of something. And so I use the same sort of process when I'm scrying, no matter what I'm looking at. And I truly and completely let the energy of what I'm looking at lead me. And yes, sometimes it's about connecting to a person, but other times it's connecting to the symbols. Sometimes everything is already in my head before I sit down with the person. So it's the way that energy or spirit moves for that individual. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Okay. Yes, that does make sense. I was very curious about that because, like I said, I do know people that have very specific rituals and processes that they have to get into before they start reading for somebody in general. Um, are there any specific processes that you have when you start? Because, like you said, you're kind of fluid with everything, but I know you also are a herbalist.
I am.
Um, how does that play in as well? Like the type of teas that you have, does that depend on the client that you're working with that you choose what to use?
Well, there's a practical side to tea leaf reading. So
Right.
you're very young and you have great eyes. I am almost 50 and I like to read black tea in a white cup because it's easier to see.
Right.
And, before 2020, before the pandemic happened, I did used to blend my own teas for in person readings. But now, just for the sake of sanity, I buy tea. I buy tea that was made in a factory that I know their sanitation practices are hopefully
Right.
very good. And so that is what I use for my in person readings. When I am reading remotely, which is honestly most of my readings these days, I whatever tea that person picks, I have a video on my website, like how to pick tea for your reading. And it is interesting to me what teas people choose. I actually just had the conversation the other day. Almost no fire signs ever come to me for a tea reading. They always go for the smoke reading. And I feel like it's because they somehow innately know that is what is calling to them. They want to have the involvement of fire in their reading. Whereas a lot of the people that come to me for tea are earth or water signs. And it's just, the air and the fire signs like smoke. It makes sense. It's fire and air, and the tea is earth and water with the plants and the hot liquid. It just makes sense that that's how it goes. And as far as my ritual to prepare, so there there are some just very simple things. First of all, I like a quiet room. I just don't like a lot of noise. I don't like a lot of background chatter. Over the years, I've realized that there are public places that just aren't good for me to read. I can't do cafes. They're too noisy, they're too loud. And honestly, when you're having a really personal, in depth reading, the last thing you want is some person you don't know hanging around listening to it while they drink their latte. It's really not pleasant. So I have learned over time that cafes are not a place. Cafes and bars are not a place I want to do readings. I usually, if I'm going to do an in-person reading, I lean more towards an antique store or an art gallery because they're quiet. People are respectful in places like that. They just sort of naturally bring respect out. And it's just a much better situation for the person who is seeking information from me. And as far as other rituals, besides the quiet, I always have to have a full stomach. I can't read on an empty stomach, it's just distracting. I do like to get a very long night of sleep beforehand. And then after a reading, I do have a specific ritual. I do like to do either a salt bath or a salt scrub just to kind of completely cleanse and clear from everything that might still be sticking from that reading. I do also use flower essences a lot. I make my own, and I do still use some ones that I buy as well that just are old favorites. But the energy of the flowers is wonderful for grounding. It's wonderful for, opening chakras. It just works really well for me, probably because I love plants so much. And that's one of my other regular rituals is to utilize different flower essences for wherever I'm at in that moment. Sometimes I even recommend them to people who come for readings. Like, do you know about flower essences? You might have heard of Rescue Remedy. That's one of the most famous ones. But sometimes one's just singing to me like, you must tell this person about, whatever flower and see if it resonates for them. But yeah, those are my main rituals, especially the one that comes after. That downtime is really important, and the good sleep, really important.
Yes. Yes, I can agree with that. Um, I used to do readings well, I used to do them online a few
Mhm,
years back. And
mhm.
so it got to the point where I was like, man, I need to make sure. Like, I had my whole setup. Like, I needed to make sure I was in a quiet spot.
Hmm.
Kind of all the same things, making sure I was sleeping, make sure I was cleansing my space.
Hmm.
Um, but then I eventually got out of it because I felt like it was a lot with the online portion of it. Do you have
Hmm.
a lot of, I guess, influx since COVID with everything being online? Is that hard to keep up with?
I actually love doing online readings. For one thing, it puts me in my own space, like what you were just saying, and I don't have to worry about parking or lugging my vintage teacups around. Just the physical act of setting up or reading becomes simple for me, and I don't find any. You probably found this too. There's no lack of connection just because we're not in the same room. The connection feels just as strong, and I have been able to work with people from all over the world, which is really cool. I have done readings for people in Europe and China and Canada and all over the United States that otherwise would have never walked through my door. And that's been one of the gifts of doing online readings. Um, I do miss being able to give people a hug. That is a thing that is not the same, and I did always enjoy that if it's applicable. Not every reading is that applicable, but when applicable, I do miss that moment of comfort, humanity.
Right. Yeah.
That's a nice thing about an in-person reading. And the other thing, turning the cup,
Mm.
that is tricky. If you've never seen it done, I actually have a cup here I can show you, and I'll show you on camera. But this is hard for a lot of people. And I always tell people this will be the toughest part of your day when you have to turn the teacup. So while we were talking, I drank this teacup. This is Earl Grey tea. It is my favorite black tea. It's my everyday drinking tea. And it's in a vintage teacup. It's the teacup itself is it's very low and shallow. It has like a nice deep bowl and a wide opening. And these are my preferred reading style of cups. I do have a lot of mismatched cups, but they have their own stories and I love them. So then I take the saucer and I put it on top like this. Now, some tasseographers read from the saucer, I read from the cup. And from here, this is the tricky part. You grasp firmly, or you'll have tea
Yeah.
everywhere, literally. And I usually make circles. I don't care how people move the cup, as long as they're not like doing this, which is a nothing. Like you gotta move it around a little bit. It feels good to stretch your shoulders out too, and then invert it like this. And then, oh yeah, you can see there's tea.
Yeah. Cool.
This looks like a lot of my teacups lately. But they all look different. And then my process is if I'm in person, I sit quietly and do a drawing. Or if I'm virtual, I take the pictures that someone sends me and I do a drawing. I'm not going to lie, once again, because I'm a little older, I love the pictures versus in person because I can look at them in Photoshop and zoom in. In person, I whip out my trusty magnifying glass, like Sherlock Holmes style. But there is a beautiful thing about Photoshop. It can zoom in like 600%. And I can see so much more than I can hustling through a 20-minute drawing versus doing it for an hour. So this is one of my drawings. Trying to get it in the screen for you.
Oh, there you go. Yes.
So you can see there's all kinds of stuff in here that doesn't necessarily make sense until you have someone break it down for you.
Right.
And that's the second part of tea leaf reading. First, you have to see the tea. You have to be able to look at something and make sense of, as a lot of my clients say, a big messy glob. And after the big messy glob, and once I do this is my process. I then put meanings to all of these symbols, and I've been doing that for over 30 years. So I started when I was very young, quite by accident, and I have been keeping track of symbols and meanings for all of that time. And I have taken classes where you talk about symbology in art or literature or folklore. The truth is, there's no one who knows every symbol. There are too many. Once you get into different cultures and history and there's a lot. I mean, you can actually literally get a PhD in symbology. There's that much to know. And no, I did not study symbology exclusively in college. However, I do have my own set of symbols, and there are a lot of things that come up commonly. So one example, going into 2020, I saw squirrels in every cup. And to me, a squirrel is about conserving your resources, saving for a rainy day, like literally saving your nuts and seeds. And I kept seeing that in everybody's cup, and people would be like, "Oh, I'm doing fine financially." I'm like, "Well, I'm seeing this. This is what's coming." And sure enough, it was what was coming for everybody.
Right.
Everybody needed to save their nuts and seeds going into 2020. So that was a really common one. I see a lot of skulls. And to me, a skull is not an ominous figure. It's about you're still thinking about something from the past that it's time to move on from. So those are just common symbol examples. But I'm just like going on and on. Gabrielle, what else can I answer for you?
100% interested in everything you just said. Actually, the last part, I wanted to ask, so when you're looking at these symbols for those who are starting to read for themselves, sometimes they have trouble trying to discern whether they should go with the meaning that they carry with a symbol. So if somebody sees a rose, for example, my interpretation of a rose might not be the same as what like mass media or everybody else thinks of it. I have a special meaning. And sometimes they're like, well, I don't know if this is actually what this means because there's another meaning out there. How do you know which one is working flows, I guess?
Okay, so there's multiple meanings for everything. And then there are things that are going to be personalized to that person that you can never guess,
Right.
ever. One time I looked in somebody's cup and I saw an iguana with a martini glass. And I'm sitting there like, if I say this man's going to think I've lost my mind. The big piece of advice here, the big takeaway is you have to trust yourself. I trust myself. I trust my vision and I trust what I see. So I said to him, I was like, look, I don't know what this is going to mean to you, but there's an iguana drinking out of a martini glass. My client just started laughing hilariously. It was his mother. They call his mother the reptile, him and his siblings, and if she likes to drink martinis. I could have never guessed that in a million years. Those were not common meanings for iguanas or martini glasses. It was completely a personal message for him.
Mm-hmm.
There's no book that will ever tell you that. Like that was just one of those, you have to trust yourself and go with the moment. Another reading, I had a Sasquatch playing a guitar. I almost didn't speak it because I was like, this can't be right. This can't be right. And then I was just like, stop doubting yourself. Just say it and see what she thinks. And if it's wrong, you move on and read the rest of the cup.
Right.
Sure enough, her boyfriend liked to dress up like Sasquatch and play in a band. Once again, I would have never guessed that. No book's ever going to have that answer. The truth is that when it comes to reading symbols, you should know as much as possible. You should know your own meaning. You should know Victorian meaning. You should know art history meaning. You should know Cherokee meaning. And you should trust yourself to know when all of those are wrong, because they're going to be sometimes. And say you're looking at a symbol like a wolf that has meanings, different meanings across the world. Like there are a lot of meanings to a symbol of a wolf. When you see it, when you feel it in your heart, in your gut, you trust the first thing that comes to your mind. It's part of the story that you're telling, and it will unfold appropriately if you trust your intuition. If you overthink it, I guarantee you, almost 100% of the time, when you overthink something, you will not get it right. When you go with your feeling, when you go with your intuition, when you go with that first, you're right. That's the one.
I love that you have these stories with you. Mentioning these times when you were like, man, I really didn't want to say that. We the previous guests that we've had on had similar experiences where they were like, I know this is crazy, but I had to say this one thing that kept coming up. It just wouldn't leave me alone. And as soon as we said it, the other person was connected in immediately, and we made a lot of progress. And I think situations like that are really cool because it's almost a confirmation for you as well, like as a reader. So I think that's awesome. So with your smoke readings, I was curious about those as well. Do you have a similar process with that, or how exactly do those work?
So smoke reading is really cool, and it's one of those things that it's actually harder to do it in person because you need a safe environment to burn things.
Right.
And that's not most places, that's not most businesses. So I do end up doing most of that work remotely. I occasionally find a space that is an appropriate spot for it. It's not drafty, that nothing's going to catch on fire if a spark drops. Um, but I use both candles and incense, and I do make my own incense, and it's not difficult. So don't let anybody fool you into thinking it is. It's really not. And I like to make my own because a lot of purchased incense is just full of like the weirdest, craziest stuff that you shouldn't be breathing ever, like ever. So I make my own for that reason. And also, then I can choose what I want to burn, much like choosing the right tea and me discerning something about someone by the tea they chose. I can say, with the smoke rating, the answers actually come in very quickly because smoke moves in real time. And I wish I could show you right now because it would be, but I'm not going to light a fire by my computer. But the smoke will actually shape to your answers as you speak. And a lot of people say, I don't see anything. And to me, it's so obvious. Like, there are some ways you can speak through smoke that, to me, and the smoke flowing hard to the right is yes, hard to the left is a no. When it creates a ladder, which is very distinctive, you can really see it. That means you have a lot of climbing to do. Like this process is going to take some time, and you will have to work. And other times, the smoke will change into letters. It will change into shapes. There are very distinct faces that come through in smoke. And when you're using a candle, now the tricky thing about candles is that if you buy really nice ones, they don't smoke. you you have to buy kind of not the best quality candles.
Right. Yeah,
Otherwise, you get
over here that we get,
yeah. Otherwise,
and it has to be like the little cheap ones. But yeah.
yeah. Otherwise, you get smokeless wicks, which are so much better for your home and your lungs. But if you want to use candles for divination, they have to blow smoke. So, I mean, there are ways to like throw and read wax, but that is really messy.
Yeah.
And again, be careful you don't hurt yourself if you decide to try that. But when you're looking at smoke from candles, I actually like to sometimes use paper to capture smoke above a candle or a incense burning, and it will create patterns on the page. And I read that just like I would any other set of printed symbols. You can seal it with some art spray, and actually, I've even done the technique to create art for galleries.
Wow.
It's really pretty. It's a very unique look. There's some of them on my website. If you saw them, there's some of the smoke drawings on there, and nothing quite looks like it. It's really, really pretty. So that's the process. Basically, it's looking into the smoke, either in the air or on paper, to see what shapes and patterns come out. I usually talk to it out loud. And I will take that list of that client's questions, or if we're together, I say, just ask. Your guides are here, your ancestors are here. Ask, and they'll show you. And of course, that's why I'm there in the middle to interpret what comes out, because I'd say most people aren't used to looking at smoke. But it's definitely a learnable way to perform divination, and it's as old as time. I mean, people have been looking into both fire and smoke and embers and ash for divination since fire was discovered,
Right. Right. Um. So how did you get into? You have like, so you do the tea leaf readings,
Mhm.
the smoke readings, and I also saw that you do some tarot and oracle.
I do.
How
How did I get started?
yeah, how did you start, and which one did you start with, and how did you move over to the others?
All right, that's actually a super easy answer. The tarot reading came from my family. I have a Heritage Tarot deck. It's been in my family a long time. And like most rebellious teenagers, I decided I didn't want to do the same thing that my family did. The tea leaf reading came in quite by accident. And I will tell you that I feel almost like I've been trained my whole life to find patterns in chaos. When I was a little girl, my dad and I used to play a game he called Scribble Art. And I highly recommend doing this. If you ever feel stuck, if you ever can't get your brain going, close your eyes and take a pen or pencil or colored pencil. Just close your eyes, scribble all over a page. And it's even better if you do it with another person. You both scribble on the page and then trade. And then look for the pictures in each other's scribble mess. And I've been doing that since I was like a really little kid. So I've been trained my whole life to find these patterns and pictures inside of chaos and a mess. So I can do it in almost any medium. I mean, to me, scrying is natural for that reason. I'm used to seeing that way.
Right.
And I absolutely recommend scribble art. However, if you want to get your intuition started, if you want to get your creativity started, if you just want to try it for fun, do it. It's a great exercise, and I still do it to this day, and I love it. And my dad still does it too. He's in his late 70s. I actually have a piece of his scribble art right here.
Oh, cool. That reminds me of that. I used to doodle all the time, and then I would connect all of the lines so that they made something that I saw in them. So no, that's cool. I never heard of somebody doing that though.
So you're right on target. Just stick with that. Do that. I mean, if you're doing it naturally, it's there for you.
Right.
So that's how I learned the initial process of tea leaf reading and smoke scrying. Basically, I've always been doing it, and I guess I was 16 when my mom got me my first loose tea. So this was a while ago, and the tea balls that they came in, the little thing that held the loose tea, it was like a total piece of junk, and it broke the first time I used it. So there was loose tea all through my cup. And I was like, this is a really fancy gift, and I'm going to drink it anyway.
Yeah.
So I did. And as it stuck to the side of the cups, I said, look, this looks like a cat. And my mom said, well, that's actually a really ancient form of divination. What else do you see? So I started keeping a notebook, and I would draw the cat and what I thought about it, what I felt about it. And that's how I started creating my first symbol language, was just from seeing things in the cups. And I kept that language, and it grew and grew and grew. And over the decades, that has been how I just pull to do the reading. So I'm completely self-taught. And with smoke, I've always gazed into smoke and saw pictures, probably because I gaze at clouds and see pictures, and I gaze at water and see pictures, right? But it was another psychic who said, have you heard of capnomancy? It's smoke scrying. She's like, it's what you're already doing. And so I looked it up. There's not a lot out there on it, but there are other people who do it. And she was the one who suggested I try to capture it on paper to create art with it. And I do, and I love it, and it's fantastic. But I love all three. Tarot and oracle cards definitely have a lot of fans. People really resonate with them. They are a fantastic way to, most people go for that first before they try something like tea and smoke. Right. It's more comfortable. It's more known. And even though smoke and tea leaf reading are much older, they've been in part of humanity's history for centuries longer. Right. Because tarot is actually a baby in the divination world, and oracles even more. But they're a great entry point, and they have a lot of value. And I like how when you are working with tarot, they can bring someone into the space they immediately need to be in. And it isn't always a comfortable space, right, but it is frequently the message they need to hear. I mean, sometimes when I flip over some of those challenging cards, I'm like, okay, what are you into?
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, some of them can be pretty rough. It's like, okay, let's break this down for a second. Yep. I think there's so many symbols that they use in tarot and oracle that sometimes it can be overwhelming. But I
Okay.
think a lot of people learn to break down their symbols from there on. So I do think it's a really good tool for a lot of people. Um, and I just wanted to ask two more things.
Yeah.
Uh, Focusing on the other side of things. So for readers, for other readers, do you have any advice for them? For anybody starting their own, I mean, they're kind of their businesses. There's a lot of people that who want to do readings for others, and they don't know where to start, and they don't know what kind of boundaries to make with themselves and with
Mm.
others. Do you have any advice in regards to that?
Actually, I have a few pieces of advice for that. The first is to trust yourself. You know, that's so important. As a reader, don't doubt yourself. There are going to be people that you're just not right with, and that's okay. You can't resonate with everyone. No reader is for everyone. That's just not a thing. And that's fine. And don't let that, when it happens, get you down, because it will happen sooner or later. Statistically, it's going to happen.
Right.
So that's the first piece of advice. The second piece of advice is to treat your business like a business. It is a spiritual practice, but it is still very much a business. You need to keep track of your finances. You need to keep track of your spending and income, and you need to pay taxes on your money.
Right.
In the
Yeah.
United States, if you make more than $600, you need to pay taxes on that. And especially if you want it to be your job, you have to do it right, and you have to treat it like as if you were running a salon or a restaurant or any other business. And if you don't know how to do that, learn. That's there's just no two ways about it. You have to. And as far as boundaries, that is really good. That is a really good thing to talk about. So I actually had to exercise my boundaries just today. I had a client call me today and say, "Can you come tomorrow to my place of business? We're having an open house, and it would be cool to have a tarot reader, but I don't want to pay you. I want people to pay you when they get here." And my boundary is that I do not come and do tarot readings unless I either am paid for by the hour by the person who's bringing me in, or I'm paid for at least 5 readings in advance. I just don't come. I'm not going to sit somewhere for hours hoping that somebody's going to show up. I mean, I can use those 5 hours working on my business,
Right.
or, you know, working on my home or anything else. I'm not going to just give away 5 hours of my time. That's a boundary. And I feel like, especially when people are starting out, they're so eager that they'll go and sit somewhere for 5 hours for free and maybe make $25. It wasn't worth their time. It wasn't worth their gas money. It wasn't worth their makeup, you know?
Yeah,
It just
exactly.
wasn't. So it's really important to understand what you need to function as a business person and what you need to function as a human being to keep yourself mentally healthy. Let me tell you how sad it is to sit somewhere for hours knowing that nobody's coming in to get a reading from you because you weren't promoted ahead of time. So
Right.
nobody's expecting to get one. Maybe you'll get lucky and get a few, but it's not likely. Believe me, I've made these mistakes.
Yeah, no, I'm hearing this and I'm like, oh man, where were
Yeah.
you?
Well, I think that this is a thing in our industry. There's not enough mentorship that goes on. And I even at my point, like I'm definitely advanced, but there are people more advanced than me. And I would love to have one or two of them tell me, like, when you were at my level, what came next? What mistakes did you make? How can you help me not make those mistakes? But people aren't willing to open up like that, and I don't know why. And I feel like, especially for beginners, if you're lucky enough to find a mentor, I mean, be really grateful to them for sharing their time and knowledge with you, and their experience. And the other thing is, if you're lucky enough to find a mentor, pay attention.
Yes, yes, of course.
In my other career working as an editor and photographer, I have mentored people who were like, "Oh, well, maybe that happened to you, but it won't happen to me." Like, okay, good luck. And
Yeah,
sure enough, they fail in the same spots where I failed because they didn't listen. And if somebody is kind enough to mentor you, take what they say to heart, and don't count on sheer luck. to get you through. Count on your business skills and your intelligence to get you through.
Right.
Those things are a critical part of any business. And this is a business if you're trying to do it for money.
Right. And we do have a few minutes left. Is there anything that you wanted to promote or anything about you or any events coming up, anything you're offering that you want to promote for yourself?
Oh, can I add one thing to what I just finished? Oh, it's to present yourself as a professional. If you're going to read tarot cards for money or tea leaves for money or do scrying for money, or you're a medium or an animal communicator, show up in clean, fresh, professional clothing.
Right.
Have business cards. Speak to people and look at them in the eye. Present yourself as a professional, because every time somebody doesn't look professional or doesn't act professional, you reflect on every single one of us in the industry, and you perpetuate the myth that, you know, we're not professionals. And those of us who are professionals and work hard at it, I want everybody to hear that. And the other thing is to charge like a professional. Mm-hmm. If you are charging $10 for readings, I want you to sit down and do the math. A living wage in the United States, if you live in just an apartment, not a home, but an apartment, is $60,000. How many readings do you have to do in a year? $10 to make $60,000 and pay tax on that and pay your rent and pay for a car and pay for your health insurance. It's literally impossible. It's literally impossible. So I tell people, please charge appropriately, because if you don't, that makes those of us who do look outrageously expensive, when in reality, we're not getting rich. We're just making a living wage.
Yes, I agree.
A little bit about how to find me. A little bit about what I do and how to find me. So I do tea leaf reading, I do smoke scrying, and I do tarot and oracle cards. I also do speaking engagements. I do them on Zoom. So wherever your listeners are in the world, if they want to hear me talk about the history of divination or cryptids or the history of witches in the United States or flower essences or herbalism, I am available on Zoom. I'm available in person in the Mid-Atlantic, although this year I'm also speaking in Salem at the Divination conference. I'm very excited. And so I will travel. But I am at teaandsmoke.com. And I am a 3rd-generation tarot reader, 2nd-generation herbalist, and I absolutely love what I do. And I hope that anybody else who loves this kind of practice, this kind of work, this kind of connecting to both nature and spirit will pursue it openly to normalize it for all of us.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording here, but it was enjoyed you.